How y'all doing? All right, it's great to see a great crowd out here. So before I begin, I have a confession to make. My name's Tyson Langhofer, and I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time, so I've heard all the lawyer jokes. When he was alive, my grandpa loved telling me every new lawyer joke he heard. So here's a few of my favorites. What's the difference between God and a lawyer? God doesn't think he's a lawyer. How does an attorney sleep? First, he lies on one side, then he lies on the other. What's the difference between an accountant and a lawyer? Accountants know they're boring. So as a lawyer, you may be expecting that I would talk about the importance of enacting and defending good pro-life laws. I have many colleagues at Alliance Defending Freedom who do amazing work drafting model legislation, testifying in front of state legislatures, and defending these laws in court. At ADF, one of our 5 generational wins is to guarantee the right to life from conception to natural death. To accomplish that, most of our work takes place in the courtroom, in Congress, and state legislatures. That's vitally important work, and we definitely must continue to do it until every state has laws that protect life from conception to natural death. But tonight, in the few minutes that I have, I want to talk about the importance of culture. You see, our goal is not just to make abortion illegal. Our goal is to make abortion unthinkable. If we want to make abortion unthinkable, then we not only must change the laws, we have to change the culture. We must create a culture that values life in every way, shape, and form. Many times we don't focus on changing the culture as much because changing culture is hard. It takes a long time, and it's much more difficult to measure results than tallying up how many good laws we've passed. But it's just as important. Pastor Rick Warren said that law is downstream from culture. By the time you make a law about something, you're reacting, not acting. I'd rather shape the culture. Now, the pro-abortion movement understands this. That's why they created the Shout Your Abortion organization. Shout Your Abortion's mission is to normalize abortion and elevate safe paths to access regardless of legality. Their website says since 2015, countless people have shared their abortion stories. Together, we've transformed the culture. You see, they recognize the value of culture. They recognize that if the culture values and approves of abortion, then abortions will continue even if the law prohibits it. But that also means that they recognize that if we create a culture where abortion is unthinkable, then abortion will stop even if it's legal. When I look at our current culture today, I see a culture that in many ways is moving towards valuing death more than it values life. Let's just look at a few recent examples. In December, Brian Thompson, CEO of the United Healthcare, was gunned down in cold blood on the streets of Manhattan. Brian was 50 years old and had a wife and 2 kids. A normal, healthy culture, one that values life, would mourn and decry this violent, senseless act. Yet, instead of mourning, many in our culture celebrated his killing and valorized the murder. United Health Group posted a statement on Facebook regarding Thompson's death. Within just a few days, the statement received more than 46,000 reactions. 41,000 reacted with the laughing emoji. 41,000. Almost 90% of the responses. That's astonishing. Approximately 1 year before, on October 7, 2023, Hamas terrorists perpetrated the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history when it massacred more than 1,200 Israeli civilians. As with the murder of Brian Thompson, this atrocity should be universally denounced and the death should be mourned by everyone on every side of the political spectrum. Instead, we saw celebrations in the streets of New York and at many of our most prestigious universities throughout the country. These celebrations justified and encouraged the violence by chanting, "From the river to the sea," calling for global intifada by any means necessary. College administrators essentially did nothing and many times even encouraged or condoned the calls for violence. Again, this is astonishing. Another example are the recent studies analyzing the results of Canada's increasing liberalization and expansion of its assisted suicide law. Originally, the law specified that to be eligible, a person's natural death had to be, quote, reasonably foreseeable. Over time, through various court decisions and amendments, the law now allows persons whose sole medical condition is mental illness to be eligible for assisted suicide. Now, a recent study compared the number of people in Canada choosing assisted suicide to those in California. Both Canada and California granted access to assisted suicide in 2016. Both have similarly sized populations, similar demographics, and no real difference in the leading cause of death or overall death rates. Yet the difference in the number of assisted suicides is shocking. In 2022, 853 Californians died by assisted suicide. In Canada, on the other hand, 13,241 people died by assisted suicide. That's 4.1% of all deaths in Canada. Now, one of the stories in the study vividly illustrates why there's such a vast difference in outcomes. A Canadian military veteran and former Paralympian who had been trying to get a wheelchair ramp installed at her home for 5 years testified that she was offered the option of assisted suicide by her caseworker. Yeah, you heard that right. This caseworker was like, sorry, we can't get you a wheelchair ramp, but hey, I've got some good news. I see that you're eligible to kill yourself. Yeah, the study confirmed that at least 4 other veterans were also offered the option of assisted suicide when trying to access resources and care. Now, the final example I want to highlight happened earlier this week when the Senate considered passage of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. This is a bill that would require healthcare providers to provide the same degree of care for a child born alive during an attempted abortion procedure as they would for a child during normal childbirth. Finally, something we can all agree on, right? Doctors must care for a baby born alive under their care regardless of their circumstances. Surely a society as advanced and as enlightened as we are can agree that at the very least, a doctor has a duty to provide basic health care for a baby born under his care. Right? Apparently not. Every single Democratic senator voted against this bill. Every single one. Not a single Democratic senator thought that it was a good idea to ensure that the law requires a doctor to provide basic care for a baby born alive under his care. So these stories paint a pretty bleak picture of our culture and how it views life and death. So how do we change culture? Well, the first step is to define and understand what culture is. Culture is defined as the sum total of ways of living built up by a group of human beings and transmitted from one generation to another. More specifically, a culture is made up of a shared set of beliefs, values, customs, traditions, social norms, language, art, and behaviors that are passed down through generations within a group of people, essentially defining their way of life and shaping how they interact with each other and the world around them. So a culture is defined by how we live our lives. What do we prioritize? What do we value? I've thought a lot about why our culture in many ways has come to prioritize or value death more than life. In my estimation, the primary reason is that for much of our mainstream culture, it's constantly sending the message that death is to be preferred over any impediment or burden to what we view as our happiness or our ability to, quote, live our best life. That death may be your own, or it may be the death of someone else who you believe is an impediment to living your best life. Let me illustrate by using one of the stories from the Shout Your Abortion website. This was written by a 19-year-old college student. She said, quote, I was able to combat the sadness of experiencing an abortion with the knowledge and empowerment that I have fully chosen my own future. I chose myself. The fetus was unwanted. It felt like I had a tumor growing inside of me, and I felt so claustrophobic. I feel deeply sad for the women in America who will now have to put the future of a fetus before their own hopes and dreams. I would be nearly fully term by now. But if I had not had that abortion, and I'm so unbelievably grateful that I did because I'm not ready to give my life and my future career up yet. My future was worth it, and I'm more than just a vessel to produce new life. I'm strong, intelligent, caring young woman. I'm not a murderer. I'm so proud of myself for choosing me. This incredibly sad perspective reflects a young woman who has grown up in a culture that has told her that a child is going to be an impediment to her hopes and dreams rather than a fulfillment of her hopes and dreams. For most of human history, little girls have grown up hoping and dreaming of the day they can become a mother. Now, many see a baby growing inside as a tumor to be removed rather than a miracle to be cherished and nurtured. When confronted with a cultural crisis this large and consequential, it's tempting to just throw up your hands and say it's hopeless. What can I possibly do to change an entire culture on this issue? But on further reflection, each of us has a far greater ability to impact culture than what we think. If culture is just the sum total of how we as a society live our lives, then each one of us impacts and shapes the culture by the decisions we make and how we live our lives. Whether we intend to or not, we do impact the culture every day simply through the decisions we make. When we impact the culture, we impact the way others view the world and the decisions they make. Let me give you a simple illustration from my life. About 15 years ago, I was working in private practice at a large law firm in Kansas. My wife and I had built a house in an upscale neighborhood. We just had our 5th child, so we had 5 kids under the age of 10. Needless to say, we were an anomaly in the neighborhood. Through various comments and reactions, I could see that many of our neighbors were skeptical and bemused about our life choices. They were also concerned about how this gaggle of kids was going to disrupt their way of life. Our next door neighbor was a successful dentist and his wife. They had 1 child, several years older than our oldest. Over time, we developed a good relationship. 4 years after we moved in, their only son graduated high school. At the graduation party, the wife said to me, "You know, you guys did it right." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Having all those kids. After we had our son, I thought this is just too much work, so we decided not to have any more. Now he's graduating. I'm still so young. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life." I was really surprised. Jamie and I weren't trying to influence anyone's opinions about the importance of children and family. We were just living our lives. But the private choices we made had influenced others' opinions and changed the way they viewed the world, what should be prioritized and cherished. So as I close, I just want to remind and encourage you that each decision you make contributes to shaping culture. Collectively, we have the power to shape and define our culture through the way we live our lives. The decisions we make reflect our priorities. We can create a culture that values life more than it values death through the individual decisions we make. Now let's go out and create that culture together. Thank you.